This is Don DiLego, and you were listening to the Loudini Rock and Roll Circus and the golden voice of Lou.
Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. You are back with another Loudini Rock and Roll Circus, and that website, just in case you don't know, is loudinirockandrollcircus.com. The new music podcast every Saturday, and 2 interviews every week on Tuesdays, released on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and all kind of goodies there. To stay abreast of everything, I highly recommend that you sign up for our mailing list. That way you get the podcast sent directly to you. It's no muss, no fuss. Just go to loudinirockandrollcircus.com to get all that information. I'd like to thank my sponsor real quick, Positively Pittsburgh Live Magazine, pplmag.com, Pittsburgh's first internet radio, TV network, and online community magazine. You can watch videos and listen to audios, read articles, and get coupons with all the different businesses that are there. A lot of great content. You can learn a lot of really cool stuff, a lot of stuff about health and wellness. And we, I believe, are the only rock and roll podcast there. So kudos to Positively Pittsburgh Live for hosting the Loudini Rock and Roll Circus. You can also start your own magazine page. So if you're so inclined to do a podcast or put out educational videos or something, it's a great place to be seen by about 1 million new or unique visitors every month. That is Positively Pittsburgh Live Magazine, pplmag.com. Now, the gentleman that we have on our interview today is Don DiLego. Since the release of his previous album, Photographs of 1971, Don has produced and released 2 EPs as Beautiful Small Machines with his longtime musical partner, Bree Sharp. And this also included a guest appearance by Duran, Simon Le Bon. I'd love to hear that story. And penned the soundtrack to the feature film Ranchero, and helped co-write many songs that would appear on Jesse Malin's Love It to Life album. During that same interim period, he also played on the Light of Day tour in Europe, which traveled to over 10 countries, sharing the stage with Malin, Marah, Willie Nile, and for a brief, fleeting moment, even Bruce Springsteen, the boss himself. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Don DiLego to the Loudini Rock and Roll Circus.
What an intro. Makes me sound like I've done something.
Are there any cowboys, Don, in New York City? This is what I want to know.
You know, I'll tell you something. I took a lot of slack years ago. The first record that I ever had in my whole life, my dad used to own a bar when I was a kid, and he had a jukebox in there. And interestingly enough, my dad actually wasn't a big music fan, but what he'd do is he would bring, you know, when they would change over the 45s in the jukebox, he'd bring home a couple for the kids. He'd steal home a couple. And so the first record I ever owned was Rhinestone Cowboy. And for some reason, I was convinced that the Rhinestone Cowboy lived somewhere in the vicinity of where I grew up, and that I would see a horseback riding Rhinestone Cowboy. But somehow I connected to this sort of, and I grew up in Western Mass. I mean, I have a very, you know, not very farm-oriented. Western Mass is very beautiful and bucolic and all that kind of stuff, but, you know, not cowboy per se. But I just sort of really connected with that on an early stage. So when I moved to New York in the mid-'90s, I was always wearing, you know, my thrift store cowboy shirts, and people would make fun of them, saying I was like urban cowboy. But, of course, then it just became a thing, and now everybody has them.
No,
so, yes, I'm a cutting edge of fashion. Yes.
Well, you know, that's funny because many years ago, you read something and it never, you know, it kind of sticks with you. I read a quote from Joe Strummer who said, you know, the best cowboy songs are often written by a Jew from New York City.
Well, you know, it's actually true.
We romanticize things, you know what I mean, like you did with the Rhinestone Cowboy, and sometimes that takes on a way more like larger than life and more important, because you're getting to the sort of metaphor of it, or the sort of what it really means, as opposed to, because probably being a real cowboy, honestly, dude, would probably actually kind of suck.
And a very difficult life. But, you know, you make a good point, because we do romanticize. I mean, that's how we identify with anything. We romanticize it, right? So, and you're correct. I mean, even in the music world in general, I mean, there aren't there aren't a ton of iconic acts that lasted over time that were autonomous in writing their own material, right? You have the Stones and you have a Dylan and stuff, but a lot of the longer lasting acts at some point would have, especially in the 60s and 70s, people write these songs for them. They'd be at the Brill Building, or they'd, like people coming out of Nashville just writing songs, and it takes that personality that imbibes sort of like that world of cowboy or the world of pop star, and they can sell the product. They can sell those songs. I think about that for myself all the time. I'll listen to some of my own material and I go, God, you should just retire and let somebody else sell this for you because they might do a better job. But
you do work close with Jesse. Am I saying the name? Is it Malin?
Yep, correct.
Okay, yeah, you work closely with Jesse Malin, so you do some collaboration and writing for other people. But let's take a little wee bit of a step back. After the Rhinestone Cowboy, like, how did you really? What inspires you to get into music and become a singer-songwriter?
Well, honestly, I just did it since I was a kid. I mean, when I was 5, I had an Italian Catholic upbringing, and my grandfather had a big old house, and the family would get there on the weekends, and they had a grand piano that nobody played. And even at 5, I would just sort of go in there and start kind of goofing around and figuring out notes, and I'm sure annoying everybody. And then I remember my parents divorced young, but my mom had a piano, and she was in theater. I must have been 8 or 9, and one day, one of her drunk theater friends was over the house. This story doesn't end bad.
Okay,
and they sat at the piano, and they showed me the song "The Rose," and Bette Midler in the movie. But it has a very sort of traditional chording arrangement, right? It's a chording that exists. It's the same thing as "Purple Rain" by Prince. It's very, very traditional sort of chording. But they were just showing me how to play the Rose. And I remember, and I was very impressionable, and they just said, if you learn this song, you can do any song, And for some reason, that really stuck with me, and so I would just practice the Rose over and over, really just the chords, and it sort of gave me this. And now that it's funny, I've never even told this. Now that I'm telling you, I'm like, Jesus, do I keep writing the Rose over and over?
Yeah, guys, out there, if you're listening, you could just listen to the Rose, and you'll have everything done.
Right, you'll have my whole catalog. You'll have my whole catalog, yeah. But so, at a very young age, and then, of course, like anybody else that does music, when I was 13, 14, 15, I just started bands and kept going and didn't listen to advice to not do it. And here I am, way past my prime, still making records.
Well, that's fantastic. So what made you make the decision to move to New York City?
It was not a decision at all. I was living in Boston for years, a city that I love, and I had a band there that was called Standing on Earth, and we did that was sort of the band where I did my due diligence, went through the scene, worked for local radio stations, worked for local zines, and worked for local record labels, and did the whole thing that you should be doing when you're young and trying to get your band noticed. And we were together for 6-7 years, and sort of got a manager and a record deal, and I won't even bore you with that whole story, but it immediately fell apart. And of course, I was probably 26, and I said, God, my life is over. What am I going to do? I'm never going to do any more music. And my manager at the time, who was living in New York, said, well, why don't you just come here, crash at our loft, and you can kind of work on some tunes. And so it was really just default. I was sort of depressed, and the band broke up, and I had no money and nothing. And fortunately, I had, at the time I didn't think of this, but I look back at it finally that I had somebody that was willing to sort of say, hey, let me pick you up. You just stay here and, work on your music. And that's what I did. And when I moved to New York, and I just started working on some tunes, and it was the first time in my life that I worked on tunes for no reason. I didn't have a band, and I didn't have, I wasn't trying to achieve any goal. I was just like having fun. And this particular studio I was working in they were doing mostly hip hop stuff. And as a matter of fact, they did, one of the bands that was coming through every day was Company Flow, who, Mike from Company Flow now is in Run the Jewels, who are huge. And they, so these guys would be in the studio all day doing hip hop stuff, and I was sort of resident white guy in the background, and I'd come in and I'd play a little guitar on some of the stuff or bass if they needed regular instruments. But when everybody would leave, I would start goofing around with samplers or the equipment, just figuring anything out. And I wrote a few songs just as a goof. And, because the world works in crazy ways, those songs that I made got me a record deal with Universal, which is really kind of how I became myself, Don DiLego. Had I had a chance to do it all over again, I would never go by my name. I would absolutely hide under the cover of a band name, but it literally happened so fast where, here I had spent, 6, 7, 8 years in Boston hustling, and then I moved to New York, wrote a few songs, ended up getting a record deal, and it happened so quick that I didn't have a chance to even come up with something. So I signed under my name, and that's just how I started releasing solo material.
And that was Photograph. Is that when Photographs of 1971?
Well, that was well, the first record that I did with Universal was, a failed. Failed in the sense that that was a record called The Lone Star Hitchhiker. Failed in the sense of I didn't go anywhere with Universal, and then I got dropped and continued on my own. Photographs is probably my third record that I did, and that was independently done.
And then you did 2 EPs. Now your record, Magnificent Ram A, is that's going to be a full-length album?
It's a full-length album. Yep.
Okay. Why EPs in between?
Well, that's an interesting question. Again, I'm trying to figure out a way to, for the majority of people that are listening, you don't know who I am, and so it's one thing if Bruce Springsteen's answering a question, people are enthralled, right? So I'm trying to figure out a way to answer that without it sounding boring. I think really it's just a matter of what you have at any given time. Today there's no rules anymore, right?
Right.
The art of the record, and I even battled this with my new record. I had 20 songs done and I was like, there's no way no one's going to listen to 20 songs. No one's going to sit there. No one's going to put this. Very few are going to sit in their room and go, today I'm going to get stoned and listen to Don DiLego's new album and just take it all in. It's really people are going to be, and even you. I really truly appreciate. We spoke briefly before starting this about you were catching a couple of my songs, and that does mean a lot to me because I think people think, and I'm sure you're busy. You've probably done a bunch of other interviews today, and so to take the time to really sort of absorb and listen to someone else's art, that's a personal. It means a lot to me because I know people's time is very scattered. So it's a long way of getting back to the EP thing, which is to say that before I had been working on this concept of what Magnificent Ram A was for a long time, and then I had recorded a bunch of songs that did not fit that concept. And so I just decided these are good songs. It doesn't really fit this record I'm making, but I don't want to wait 5 more years to put them out. So in between Photographs and this record, I put out an EP called Western Atlantic, and a lot of the songs that I started for this record ended up on that EP. It just made sense at the time. And honestly, going forward, and you'll see a lot of acts doing this now, they're called EPs, but really we're kind of going back to where things were in the 60s anyway. The Beatles were the first band that really started the art form of making a quote-unquote album. And then you had a sort of 10, 12, 15-year period where people listened to these things. It was an event to get a record, to just go by Exile on Main Street and sit there and then talk about it with your friends or Led Zeppelin 4 or whatever. But that really was a short period of time where that was really something that was taken as an art form. But prior to that, everything was about singles. Bands existed wholly on going from one single to the next, to the next. And we're sort of a little bit getting back to that. I don't know that you'll get a lot of people that will lament the loss of the album. I'll probably be one of those people, but I'll also be the first to admit that, like everybody else, I don't always sit in my living room waiting for a record to just sit and put it on and not do anything else.
Right. Of course. Well, you've got the Magnificent Ram A coming out. Actually, by the time this airs, it will already be out. And I want to talk all about this record and who's on it and everything that's going on with it. But I think what we're going to do first is we're just going to go ahead and give everybody a taste. We're going to go ahead and play the song Drive Like Pirates.
Fantastic.
and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the song and we'll talk about the record and everything. So, guys, you're listening to Don DiLego on the Loudini Rock and Roll Circus. This is the song on his album Magnificent Ram A. This is Drive Like Pirates.
Okay, yep. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Until the morning carries you home. Try out your patience and keep your feet still buried in the ground. Last call, where we going to go? Oh, 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 last call before you show me sun. Hold on until it's done. Look out and see yourself, and soon enough you'll know. I got a feeling you've got a golden soul. Last fall, where we going to go? Oh, 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 last fall, before you show me the rising sun. Hold on until it's done. Look out and see yourself. Soon enough you'll know.
I drop me pick.
Okay, Drive Like Pirates, beautiful song, very catchy. Tell us what's the idea behind this song? Tell us a little bit about. I hate to ask songwriters to always say what does it mean, because the idea is it means something probably a little different to me than it does to you. Blah blah blah. But go ahead, kind of give us your sort of where your headspace was on this one.
Well, I have this, I have a debate with my girlfriend all the time. It's tricky because I'll write lyrics that I can tell she doesn't say anything to me, but she's like, oh, is he writing about me? Is he upset at me? Is that at me? Are we having problems that I don't know of? And Jeff Tweedy, who's one of my personal heroes, definitely, if not just musically but lyrically with all the stuff he does at Wilco, he says it best. He's like, I'm not writing lyrics that are trying to specifically tell a story for me. I'm trying to paint a picture that people can fill in what makes sense to them, and so I wish that I wish that I could tell you that I was more like a Dylan, and I have a story, and I craft this beautiful sort of twisting tale, which is an art form in and of itself, in a few verses where, character goes from this to that, and you go, oh, God, what a great storyteller. I am not that person. I definitely come from the musical side. I guess it goes back to that story of, like, someone teaching me the rose chords, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I will get a musical bed in a picture, and that comes to me very easily. And usually there's one or two lines that come with it that I then say, okay, now somehow, and Drive Like Pirates is one of them, right? I just had this feeling, this vibe, and I had that Drive Like Pirates. To me, it's just sort of about sort of the child, like, kind of getting back to your childlike or teenage years, high school years, where, being with best friends, staying up all night, seeing the sunrise, and sort of that, the innocence of the whole thing, and trying to be reminded of, hey, there was a time where things weren't so heavy and busy and convoluted. But again, I think that it's what you get, whatever the listener gets out of it is really what the song means, because I'm not telling a specific story. It's more analogous to, like, whatever mood you're in. Drive Like Pirates is just sort of a title that says, hey, let's let loose, get out there, be a little crazy, and whatever floats your boat.
Okay, I have to ask you, Magnificent Ram A. What is that?
Have you ever been to the Museum of Natural History in New York?
No, I have not.
Well, you should get there, because it's there's museums of natural history all over the place.
There's a very cool one. Just not to toot my own horn, but there is a very cool one in Pittsburgh, by the way. But go ahead. I
love Pittsburgh, and we can get back to that
okay.
later. But no, and I'm not even just saying that. There's a guy, a great artist named Matthew Ryan, singer-songwriter, who lives there, and a friend of mine who was just playing in New York, and he lives in Pittsburgh, and we were just, talking about it. And but Pittsburgh, what a great city. Anyway, there's the Museum of Natural History here in New York, which is a famous museum, and I guess Night of the Museum movies and stuff were filmed there. But there's a whole section of, the species of different animals, whatever, goats, rams,
right.
Oos, bears, everything. And then, with the technical names of all the species that I can't begin to recall. But it's a great display. They look incredible, and they look like they're in their natural environment. I was taking a bunch of pictures of them, and one of them was just talking about the magnificent ram, and I don't know what it was about it, but somehow I started filling in this but it was saying how there was a species of ram that was sort of ostracized by the other rams, and so I just sort of painted this picture of, I think I added the letter A as just sort of the species, magnificent ram A, and but this ostracized, lonely. It's very cowboy-like when you think of it. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's very cowboy-like. It's just like this lone creature on its own, kind of making its own way and trying to tell its story, and just not understood. But very often with my records, I'll have the title of the record comes almost at the beginning, and it helps steer my ship while I'm making it, because I like having a concept. I like having something to grasp onto, because songwriting is very hard. I mean, even when you hear the simplest songs in the world that are pop songs, and you go, I could do that. Well, you can't. Otherwise, I would be rich. It's just not an easy thing to do, especially if you want to do it well. So having a title for me, or a concept, or something to grasp onto when I'm sitting there pulling my hair out at 2 a.m, telling myself I'm the worst, I should give this up, I shouldn't do this anymore, which happens way more often than not. Having that title, it's like a beacon that sits there. So I know, okay, there is a finished thing out there, and I'm going to get to it, but I just need to kind of keep staring at that light. And so the titles always mean a lot to me.
Who is on the record with you?
Well, God, everybody under the sun. I've been doing this a long time, so over the years, you get to know. Are you a musician yourself as well?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So, being in a band, being with musicians, or also being in a marriage or any friendship, it's a lot of work. And as we get older, we're sticks in the mud, and we have our certain ways of doing things. But if you find people that you can speak a language with music and be able to create with, that's worth its weight in gold. And so you hang on to those people through a lifetime. And, for example, I mean, there's a lot of people. I don't know if I can even name everybody, but like two of the drummers on this record, two of my favorite drummers, and I just think are world class. One is Greg Williams, who did a lot of work with Sheryl Crow early on, and he lives in Portland, Oregon. Does some stuff with Blitz and Trapper now, and he played on a bunch of songs. And there's another guy, Paul Garisto, who's he's in the Psychedelic Furs, and he drummed on a bunch of stuff too. And between the two of them, they're just guys who I absolutely know. I don't have to craft anything they're doing. I just have to say, hey, here's what I want, and they're just going to do something that's magic.
Right.
You just can't replace that.
Yeah, it can turn them loose. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another guy too that I don't know how he is not world famous, but his name's Paul Brainerd. He's another Portland guy, and he basically does I'm in Love with the Pedal Steel. And I don't even care if it's not even appropriate on a song. I'm going to have it there because it's the most beautiful instrument. I could put it on. I don't care if I'm running a classical piece. It's going to have pedal steel in it. And he's world class, just one of these savant. And that's a difficult instrument. And he's just a one-take savant. And he also does most of the horn arrangements on my record as well. I can't say enough good things about him.
Now this record is being released on your own record label, Velvet Elk Records, and co-released with One Little Indian. Okay, there's a couple subjects here that I kind of want to touch on. We're getting short of time, but tell me a little bit about your record label, Velvet Elk, and do you have other artists signed? I mean, what
absolutely.
Purchase for you guys?
Yeah, very quickly I'll say is that Velvet Elk started years ago, just sort of my own, after the Universal thing, as sort of my own vanity release label for stuff that I was doing or, other projects I was involved in. I mean, it's existed for a while, but really just for my own stuff. Okay. And then Jesse Malin and I, who, we spoke about earlier, he has just been a touchstone of the sort of New York East Village music scene. I sort of liken it to 2 degrees of Jesse Malin. I mean, the man has been knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, and we were working together on not only his records, but we were sort of saying let's build a studio here in New York so we can keep doing this. And we started doing that in a couple places. But neither one of us are businessmen, and neither one of us, after a while of realizing that just the cost that would be involved in doing something like that, and I already have a studio. It's like, well, why do I want a more expensive second one? We sort of sat down and said, let's do a record label. There's no record labels here in the East Village. There's nobody representing what's going on here. He is partners in a couple of music clubs that we just see some of the greatest bands in the world come through. And we decided to really put our focus into making the label something, like having a real heritage thing happening. So and of course we both put our own records on in that, but we've had other acts like Dead Heavens and Hollis Brown, Arthur Moon's a new band we're doing, and a bunch of other bands that we have starting to come out. And our partnership with One Little Indian has been great because not only are they sort of believers in us as, I mean, A&R is a stupid word, but just, having a pulse on what's going on around New York and having our tentacles reach out beyond. It's a good sort of way for us to tell people, hey, there's some great stuff happening here. These guys need a shot. It's not like we're a major label and we're going to give these people, any large sums of money whatsoever, right. But we're just going to shine a spotlight on them for a little bit and hopefully get them to the next stage.
So you have, you're not only a musician, you're passionate about the music that other people that are close to you, new bands are producing. So that's just sort of your impetus or your sort of inspiration for and plus what, you probably find yourself getting inspired, right? When you hear these other acts, you hear stuff that they're doing, you're like, oh, wow, that is so cool.
Inspired and intimidated. I mean, there's just no way. I'm not complacent enough to think that I'm in any position where I've gotten too great at anything. I mean, like, I'll hear, bands send our stuff all the time, and people I know, and I'll listen to it. I have a guy that plays keyboards with me, young kid. He's like Cale Hawkins. He's like 21, 22. I don't even know. He looks like he's 14. And he plays keys with me, and he comes to practice. He just knows everything. He's learned every note, every sound. I've never seen anything like it. And I sort of, in some ways, took it for granted, just that he would always show up prepared, and it almost, he's beyond his years. Anyway, the other day, he's telling me he's working on some, and I said, send me a couple of your songs. Thinking like, yeah, I'll give you some advice. And he sends me a couple of his songs, and he's a genius. I mean, the kid is a genius. I couldn't believe how good this stuff is. And I go, what are you playing keyboards with me for? Get away from me. Do your stuff. This is incredible. And that's what it's like in New York. It's just so many great people.
Yeah.
So many great. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's. Could you? Are you touring with? Okay, go ahead. Are you playing live?
Is there? Are you in a windstorm? Is there a snowstorm?
No. Somebody tried. No. That was a technical thing. I took care of it.
No, gotcha.
Are you? So are you touring? Like, what's the?
Yeah,
absolutely.
The live so I have. I'm going to have a big record. The only focus I have right now is my record release, which is, so the record comes out the 15th of July, which again probably might be in the past when this airs, but there's a big show in New York on July the 7th for the record release, and then both Jesse and I head over to Europe for a bunch of dates all around the UK, and then I'll be back in the US to do some shows here and there in the Northeast to help support the record. So I can't wait to start playing these songs.
Cool. How can the folks stay in touch with you or stay abreast of what you got going on? Tell them about give your website and stuff.
Well, obviously, if you can spell my name correctly, which, believe it or not, rarely happens, it's DonDiLego.com, and DonDiLego. And that's the easiest way. Just, come say hi. But my music's everywhere. I'm sure there's a way to get it for free somewhere, but the record's coming out, and it's going to be on vinyl, which I'm really excited about. So for those that are so inclined, I'd love people to come grab a copy of that, because I'm proud of the artwork and proud of the music inside.
All right, guys. There you have it. That is our talk there with Don DiLego. Don, new record coming out, and it's probably out by the time you're hearing this, Magnificent Ram A. If his last records are any indication, this is going to be a totally badass affair. And you got to hear a preview there, Drive Like Pirates, great song. That is Don, DonDiLego.
There you go.
.com. Yeah, you want to check that out. Guys, you've been listening to Loudini Rock and Roll Circus. My name is Lou Lombardi, a.k.a. Loudini. This is loudinirockandrollcircus.com is the website. Thank our sponsor one more time, Positively Pittsburgh Live, pplmag.com. Go check out everything they have there. If you love this music, if you love artists like Don DiLego and some of the other acts that we've been featuring here, please go to supportindierock.com. That's where you can get involved directly with the Loudini Rock and Roll Circus, with the different promotional programs that we're getting started here to get the word out about this amazing music by these types of these indie artists or artists signed to very small labels. Once again, that is supportindierock.com. You're listening to the Loudini Rock and Roll Circus. That is loudinirockandrollcircus.com. I gave you two web addresses back to back, so if it doesn't confuse you, write it down. Guys, thanks so much for listening. Thanks, Don DiLego, and we will catch you guys.
Thank you.
No problem. We will catch you guys on the next Loudini Rock and Roll Circus.